So come to the endoscopic management in neuroanesthesia. Introduction. Endoscopic neurosurgical procedures are becoming more frequent, especially in pediatric population. The advantage is that it allows intracranial intervention with minimal damage to healthy brain tissue. From the surgeon's perspective, it provides better visualization of intracranial structures. Initially, neuroendoscopy was performed exclusively for endoscopic third ventriculostomy for the treatment of obstructive hydrocephalus. However, it is being successfully employed recently in many types of neurosurgical procedures, either as a primary approach or as an adjuvant. Now, little bit about the history also. Neuroendoscopy was first done by Lespinace, an urologist, in the 1910 with the help of cystoscope to fulgurate the choroid plexus in an attempt to decrease the CSF production. In 1922, Dandy introduced the term rigid ventriculoscope and used rigid Kelly cystoscope to inspect the floor of the lateral ventricle in patients with the hydrocephalus. In later year, Fay et al. And Mixter performed ventriculoscopy to puncture the floor of the third ventricle. In 1970, advances in the fiber optic led to the development of stealable endoscope, which allowed neurosurgeon to perform complex surgery in ventricular space. Now, what are the indications of neuroendoscopy? These are following: treatment of non-communicating hydrocephalus associated with aqueductal stenosis. Compression is done by endoscopic third ventriculostomy, ETV. In short, we call it as ETV. In ETV, a hole is made in the floor of the third ventricle, which allows the CSF to flow from the third ventricle to the base and spinal subarachnoid space, thus bypasses the aqueduct. Diagnosis and treatment of intraventricular pathology like choroid plexus coagulation, and last one is biopsy and removal of the intraventricular tumor and periventricular mass, both in the adult and pediatric patients. Anesthetic considerations. Patients presenting for endoscopic treatment for hydrocephalus may range from newborn to adult. A thorough pre-anesthetic checkup should be done to rule out the multi-system congenital defects. Due to altered mental status, hydrocephalic children have poor oral intake or or they are on the diuretics, so they are prone for the dehydration. So, premedication with the anxiolytic should be avoided in newborn or infant in less than 6 months of the age, and often not required in adults, or carefully titrated as the procedure is of short duration. Now, anesthetic considerations. Patients of pituitary tumor are often associated with hypothyroidism, diabetes mellitus or insipidus, hypercortisolism, acromegaly or other endocrinopathies. Electrolyte imbalance may be there and to be taken care. They may be on long-term steroid, hormone therapy, antihypertensive or antiepileptic drugs. Now, what are the key goals in anesthesia? These are to ensure the immobility, and we should have an awake neurological accessible patient soon after the emergence to prevent and detect and treat the sharp increase in the intracranial pressure. Brainstem is also sometimes compromised already and may increase during operation, for which early detection and management of hemodynamic instability is to be done. Choice of anesthetic agents. Now, for the induction of anesthesia, it can be achieved with intravenous thiopentol or propofol in adults. Inhalational anesthetic agent like sevoflurane in small children. Desflurane, isoflurane is not preferred for inhalational induction, as it may cause excitatory phenomenon, respiratory tract irritation, cough, and may thus increase the intracranial pressure. Now, intraoperative monitoring. Every patient to be monitored as a major operation. We have to apply ECG, we have to use pulse oximeter, we have to use end-tidal carbon dioxide monitor, and we have to use nasopharyngeal temperature, because ETV is usually done in the small children. So, nasopharyngeal nasopharyngeal temperature monitoring is very much necessary, and sometimes you may require invasive arterial blood pressure monitoring. Sometimes you may do the case with the NIBP also. Now, intraoperative monitoring, as the cerebral perfusion pressures to be kept above 40 millimeters of mercury during the procedure. And what is cerebral perfusion pressure? Cerebral perfusion pressure is mean arterial pressure minus intracranial pressure, and to measure the cerebral perfusion pressure, ICP monitoring during endoscopic procedure is required, And so various methods to monitor is attaching a pressure transducer 0 dead discal base to the irrigating port of the endoscope. And second one is Codman microsensor ICP monitor inserted through the working channel of the flexible endoscope. And the third method is intraparenchymal catheter. They can also be used to measure the intraoperative pressure. ICP, intracranial pressures. Now intraoperative hemodynamic changes. Endoscopic third ventriculostomy has been associated with wide range of hemodynamic changes ranging from severe changes in the heart rate, blood pressure to the near fatal cardiac arrest. This occurs as a consequence of rostral yani upward migration of the brainstem following sudden decompression and intracranial hypotension. Possible mechanism for lethal bradycardia is ICP changes at the midbrain hypothalamus leading to alteration in the autonomic outflow. Now, how do a surgeon performs a ETV? We should know this also only then we can do a perfect ETV. It involves establishment of the connection between the third ventricle and prepontine subarachnoid space by fenestrating the floor of the third ventricle. This allows the flow of the CSF from the third ventricle to the basal subarachnoid space while bypassing the aqueduct. After ventriculoscope insertion, the procedure can be viewed on a video screen. Ventriculoscope is inserted through a frontal burr hole to the right 2 to 3 cm from the midline and in front of the coronal suture directed to the third ventricle. Bupivacaine 0.25% with the vasoconstrictor is infiltrated for analgesia and to reduce the bleeding. This is the landmark which is shown in this figure, so that you can have some idea of where the third ventriculostomy is done. This is midline and this is coronal suture. This is 2 cm in front of the coronal suture. This is where we exactly make the hole to insert our ventriculoscope, so that we can do the third ventriculostomy. Now again this is showing in brief how this ventriculoscope is inserted. It is inserted from frontal burr hole and it reaches in the floor of the third ventricle, where they just break the choroid plexus, so the CSF flows from third ventricle to the subarachnoid space. Now one should also know the complications of intraoperative complications. There can be fatal complications described in the literature which are rare. However, injury to the basilar artery is the most feared intraoperative complication. Since the artery is located on the floor of the third ventricle and can be subjected to trauma by the catheter tip, this can lead to massive intraventricular and subarachnoid hemorrhage, hemiparesis and midbrain damage. This may require urgent craniotomy and endovascular management. Transient or SIADH syndrome of the intraoperative antidiuretic hormone or diabetes insipidus may occur due to injury to the hypothalamus. Venous bleeding may occur with endoscopic manipulation and controlled with the irrigation. Manipulation of delicate structures around the third ventricle, hypothalamus and the brainstem can occasionally lead to intraoperative bradyarrhythmias, hypotension and even cardiac arrest. This procedure can also result in the reduction of cerebral perfusion or even ischemia secondary to an increase in intracranial pressure. Now postoperative complications, they can be hypothermia since the child is very small and you are using irrigating fluid. During endoscope is frequently seen in the small children. It is due to large exchange of irrigating fluid and ventricular CSF and by wetting of the drape with returning fluid. Hypothermia is potential complication that can result in the delayed awakening and disordered coagulation. Postoperative electrolyte changes may also occur. Other reported neurological complications are paralysis of third nerve, sixth nerve, delayed awakening, transitory mental confusion, headache, loss of memory, infection, convulsion, pneumocephalus and air embolism. Infection, meningeal irritation, headache, fever may also occur due to inflammatory response. However, some of the commonly observed postoperative complications such as vomiting and respiratory problems are not specific to the procedure. All patients need to be monitored in postoperative ICU after the procedure. Now conclusion, we have to draw some conclusion for the ETV endoscopic procedures. Major goals of anesthesia are to provide adequate anesthesia to the patient intraoperatively, fast recovery in post-operative period for neurological assessment, a close monitoring of the patient and good communication between the anesthesiologist and the surgeon is needed to prevent the various procedure related to complications intraoperatively as well as post-operatively. Thank you very much.